All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Vets and Real Estate Podcast. I am joined this week by the head of KW Military. Shandice, thank you so much for joining us and being willing to share your story and all the exciting things that are going on over at KW.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell us, what is it that you did while you were in the service?
So I was what we call 38 Bravo, was in the Army. Civil affairs was back in Special Operations Day. So long story short, I was kind of a liaison, if you will, between the local populace and our military. So I was the one that went over to win the hearts and minds and help kind of more of what um, the culture and getting, both groups together and more of a formation to help alleviate some of the tension.
Yeah, I can imagine that had some challenges. I spent a few years over in the Middle East as well, and there's definitely some cultural and maybe some psychological differences between the populations, especially a civilian population versus, if you want to call it an occupying force or a standing, service that's in there. I can imagine that makes real estate negotiations extremely easy at that point, does it not?
Everybody always said these, yeah, they said, "Oh, is it hard?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not getting shot at and they're not yelling and it is much more passive." I'm like, "So I'll take it all day."
So going from civil affairs into real estate doesn't sound like the natural transition. It feels like corporate America would have been a much better fit, or even more into like psychology and those aspects would have been a more natural fit. How did you go from civil affairs into real estate?
So it's interesting. So yeah, no, when I got home, so I used to actually be a police officer. And when I mobilized, I came back. Unfortunately, I injured my knee and disability, unfortunately, didn't allow me to return. So I went through vocational rehab actually with the VA. So I joined a university. So I did corporate. So I actually spent 8 years. I was a manager of their military division for online enrollment. So I was actually aiding soldiers coming back, trying to figure out what do I do after the service? What do I do for the transition? So did that for a while as I was getting my education, ended up going the counseling route. So decided, okay, how can I give back? And I noticed a lot of those who I served with were really struggling, and I had my own struggles with some PTSD and just transitions, right? I mean, to go from over there home, it's an entirely different world. So I actually became a therapist for complex trauma and addiction counseling and was a crisis responder for about a year. And I'll tell you, had to take a step back between trauma and the military. It was like, okay, I'm only seeing the most negative aspect of the world. I started becoming a little jaded and started noticing I was becoming desensitized. And so that's when I just had to make a decision for myself. It's like, I can keep going down this path. I'm great at it, but at what cost is that greatness going to be? And so, interesting enough, I was buying and selling a home, had a horrible experience with a real estate agent and started seeing it. And it was like, I could do this better. I've been in sales. I know people. I can negotiate well. That was what I did in the military. And so then it was like, okay, why don't I try something new, something that's not dangerous, something that's not negative. And then I decided to go real estate, and then kind of went into a more of a leadership path. But
Yeah, that's fascinating because that's certainly not the normal path.
no,
And one of the things that we've heard, and I want to ask you more about there, one of the things we keep hearing as we're at 60, 70 odd guests or whatever we're at now, one of the common themes we keep hearing is that there, after you get out, there's obviously this struggle of purpose and loneliness and those kind of things. How one, I think maybe more therapy for me. I thought I was the only one that went through it until we started having these conversations and I realized, oh wow, everybody else had the same struggle.
yeah.
But how is a veteran supposed to get through that? What is the ways that they get through that? Oh my gosh, I have no purpose or I left everybody, how do they work through that?
And it's hard. I did struggle with that, absolutely. One thing that benefited me is my father was always very strong into wrapping core values around what you're doing so that purpose tends to follow, if that makes sense. So just, as I was doing real estate, my dad said, how is it going to be a new purpose for you? And it's like, well, my purpose was to protect. I always have that strong duty that protects, the country and
Mhm.
protect who I love. And he's like, well, now there's a new group that needs protection. What are you going to go do for that? And he helped me with that because my father was 26 years Army as well. So, whole family, and he's like, you have to find a way to wrap who you are into something greater. Otherwise, you especially, you're a passionate person. And if you can't do that, you're gonna flounder. And so that's where both going into just education. I know I'm a idle hand and mind is not healthy for me. I'm a thinker. So that's where I dove right into that master's degree as soon as I got back and was like, okay, I gotta keep my brain going. And then through that, find that passion of how can I fiercely protect those either in real estate or in counseling. So I just got into that protect duty mode of my duty is to come back and help support those who are transitioning as well. So it took some time, but I just had to keep intertwining my core values. What is it that do honor, respect? How
Yeah.
can I wrap that into my next position? And that was my guiding light, honestly.
Okay, that makes sense. And as cliche or as kind of cheesy as it sound, you're finding the new mission, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
and I don't know, we the interesting thing and you kind of confirming the same thing that we've heard over and over is that, a lot of veterans either find success as soon as they find that new purpose, they find success and they just kill it. And then the ones that don't, maybe don't progress as far or they struggle for a long period of time where they just don't make it, much further than that. And we don't keep it at least somewhat positive on that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
they get lost. Absolutely. No,
yeah.
unfortunately, and it's actually becoming a larger percentage, unfortunately, especially as the economy has gotten harder. And what do you do
Mhm.
now? And unfortunately, a lot of the soldiers I came back with 30 and between drugs, alcohol, I mean, the struggles were real.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting ready to go to DC actually this weekend, and I've got some friends in Arlington, and we'll spend some time there. But it's kind of an interesting now that I've got a young daughter who's now starting to become interested and realize that dad had a life before her. She's realizing those kind of things and being able to kind of tell those stories so she hears it is kind of, I don't know, as morbid as it sounds, I'm kind of more interested in obviously spending one-on-one time with her, but allowing her to see we're going to NAR. So she's going to see what dad does for a living. She's going to see what real estate is, but she's also going to get to see a side of the military that she doesn't really see because it's not, we don't live that every day like, we did, 15 years ago.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I could see obviously mission passion with you coming in from a university doing veterans programs, finding yourself back in leading a military division or military veterans organization, kind of feels pretty stinking natural for you, does it not?
It's interesting too because just a few years ago, I'd been doing corporate. I've been doing, helping build real estate companies, teams, departments for the last few years, and there was a moment where I started questioning, what path am I on as well? I'm building and I'm getting further and further into it. And I was actually just telling my family about a year ago was, I need to kind of go back and find some more purpose, right? I'm like, I've been here for a while. I don't know if this is my forever. And it was interesting with that father, right? What are you going to do? And it's like, I need to go back to my roots. And I actually made the move from Gilbert, Arizona over to Surprise, Arizona by the base now. It's interesting. So, like, just a small change in scenery. But as I was talking through that, I was talking to KW, was actually doing some consulting there. And they brought up what was happening to KW. And I was like, this is weird. I said I wanted to return to my roots. And I kept saying, again, when did I have the most purpose? When did I have the most passion? It was when I was working with military, either in the military or with the military. And it was a very, the universe provide. I'll honestly say that. They were just like, well, actually, speaking of which, KW military is in a transition. You're a vet. What do you think? And it was like, okay, this is weird. Let's do this because this is everything that I've actually been thinking about and wanting to do again. And the opportunity arose immediately. So I found when things come your way, especially as easy sometimes as it does, it's like, okay, it's supposed to be my pathway.
Yeah. That makes sense. So then what have you been able to obviously somewhat
Yeah.
new to the role? I mean,
Yes.
you've been there for a little bit, but kind of studying and understanding.
Yeah.
What's the new direction now that KW Military's got new leadership? What are you excited about with the organization?
So a couple things. So, no, you're right. So the first kind of 60, 90 days, I have a very specific philosophy when I go in is that start, stop, continue, build. It's what do we want to start doing? What do we want to stop doing? What do you like from the continuation of it? And so I actually have spoken to about 750 agents just over 90 days, been very busy with feedback. You know, I Don't hold back. Tell me, give it to me straight. What do you love? What do you hate? And what was interesting is as I was going through those conversations, it was a very specific theme that I kept seeing more and more and more. It was more training, I need assistance, finding purpose, finding community, and that's where we kind of designed some of our 4 pillars. But the transition is actually where my niche is. So it's interesting, again, when you wrote, reached out, the transition is where I'm finding still is where the agents suffer the most. And so I'm actually an AI engineer. I build all my own technology now. And so as I've been getting feedback, I've been building a site for us to kind of our command center, if you will. And some of the AI courses that I'm actually now creating is helping the agent identify who they are, more of their how they process, how do they listen, how do they communicate, some of those personality indicators. But most importantly, what I found, especially with new agents, is they cannot verbalize how their skills from the military or their prior experience translates into the civilian sector, especially real estate. And unfortunately, I just keep coming across more and more, and they're just thinking that they're starting new. And so what I'm coming across is low confidence, feeling out of water, if you will. I just spoke to an agent 5 months, 6 months into the business. I could tell she was an operator. She was strong, highly structured. And as we were talking, I started having her go through some of these programs and we really isolated what her niche is. I was like, you are a combat medic. You were a operations person as a manager. These are highly transferable skills. Just think of it as, yes, it's a new chapter, this industry is a new chapter for you, but it's still in the same book. We still have the same book of experience. And so we're actually using AI to help translate those skills into more meaningful um, interpretation layers for them. And it's amazing once you start giving them words and start actually giving them, like, hey, this is how this equates here. The confidence starts going up pretty significantly and they're believing in themselves again. And it was like, okay, we need to do something here.
No, absolutely. I think LinkedIn has a study out there that talks about veterans that are leaving the military typically will find a job that is a position or 2 below where they typically were when they're in the service, and they're okay taking it, and some of it's because they don't understand how to transition skills, but then the other side of that is that they tend to promote 3 times faster than any other counterpart, and I think a lot of what you're saying is exactly true. They have the experience, they can't verbalize what it is, or they can't translate that experience, so they take a lower position, struggle, and then once they figure it out, maybe the hard way, then, next thing they're running the whole thing.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you're trying to just get ahead of it altogether up front and say, "Here's how to translate those skills."
Well, and that's, and I did that in the education field as well. So I would have a lot of agents or, excuse me, students, moving from military into the civilian world. They thought, okay, let's go education. I have my VA benefit. What program should I go into? And that's where they were getting lost. And, what was cool is the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually had a great MOS or military job translator into skills. I use that quite frequently. And I actually ran all my students through that. And it was, let's not pick what you think career pathway is going to be, wise for you to move into. What is your authentic self? If you actually have passion and it fits who you are and you're comfortable in your skin, you're going to get through the degree and you're going to actually find in the end a more suited position. If you're somebody who's more engineer minded, don't go into something that's not fitting. That's not so my goal back then was to fit them into a proper one, because unfortunately, before, even with military, the average 6 to 7 times they changed their degree before they graduated. Six to
No
seven times.
kidding.
They were bouncing because they couldn't find themselves. And it was, we were just enrolling them in these degrees and they were getting lost. And so, same pattern. I'm coming into real estate and it's like these military and it's unfortunate. You've had experiences, I'm sure yourself. Real estate is not structured. It's
No.
entrepreneurship, right?
Yes.
And, the people you meet, they may be good at a couple things like cold calling or commercial or, something specific. And unfortunately, we've kind of boxed in a lot of people of this is just that 3 or 4 ways to be successful. And that doesn't fit everybody, especially not strong operators. And I'm military, they're great at execution, but they're methodical. They're very step focused. And unfortunately, not a lot of real estate is actually geared toward that kind of mentality. And so it's actually trying to find them the right pathway.
No, and we're bringing on our first, and kind of my goal with our brokerage is bringing in military, helping him in that transition. So we're actually bringing our first one. He starts next week, and I'm so unbelievably excited to bring him in. Former recruiter, hits all the buttons, right? Everything you'd think of to come in. And then and having those kind of pre-conversations, he's on terminal leave right now. So having some of those pre-conversations with him, he's already asking, "Okay, what does this look like?" And he's already thinking military. When you come into the service, I know from the moment that I enlist, I know everything I need to do to make it to become Sergeant Major of the Army if I choose to do so. Everything is laid out for the most part, right? You need certain assignments, you need certain schools, you need certain this and this and that. And he was already approaching real estate that same way. And I was like, it's not exactly the same way, but that's what now my goal for the rest of the day is going through. I need to build out what does success look like, maybe slightly more structured, but understanding it's not going to be once you take this class, you promote. It's once you hit these thresholds, once you hit these goals, this is where your business takes. This is where you start doing it a little differently. And I think it's even doing this podcast, being a veteran, doing as much as we've done, I, as a team lead, as a brokerage owner, is now going back and going, "Oh, man, I don't even have the tools, the systems in place to help this veteran transition." I shit out everybody had gotten this figured out.
And no one does. I mean, and that's pathway. You'll hear a lot, and all my agents ask, "Well, what are you trying to design pathway?" And it's hard in real estate, as you mentioned. I mean, like, there are basic, things that we can do. I mean, KW is great with bold, and, some of those structured pieces I think is actually highly beneficial because they're one of the few that has a very organized educational program. But when it comes down to that mentor, that team lead, knowing who you're getting and that person, and you see it not only just in military, but if you go into the disc assessment, your high S's and your high C's, they need pathways. Some of those more high I's and high D's, they'll find their way, and they'll find it through the networking and peopling, because that's more of what you see in real estate, right? Is the charisma and the charismatic type personalities, and they do well that way. But unfortunately, that is a small percentage of military is what I've come across. So no, it's very hard on them. It was hard on me.
Yeah. So what else are we seeing that as you're rolling out KW military and getting it going, what else are you all seeing as the advantages of coming in and seeing agents find more success?
Just the excitement. What I've noticed too is a lot of kind of real estate, especially communities. Some of the issues that I've seen is the communities, most people are not aware, especially at Keller Williams specifically, is the community is actually run by a leader. It's not a W-2. And actually, it's not under the KWRI's actual umbrella in terms of ownership. They're bringing in somebody who wants to have an entrepreneurial spirit of a leader to take it on. It's very similar to a team. And so, what I tend to see a lot of it is more of an influencer type positions. Again, you get the high I's, the high D's that are excited, great coaches, great trainers, and primarily you see Zoom calls, and doing, some coaching and developing that way. But a lot of it is the structure is what still is missing, and that's that integrator type personality, unless you have a great ops team that comes with you to build kind of that community outward. Um, you're coming up with scaling capacities too. I mean, as a coach, mentor, you cannot help more than 100, 200 agents at any given time. It's just, it's unrealistic. And so that's kind of what the ceiling is I've seen, especially with KW military, as it's gone over the last few years, is just the scalability of it. And so that's what I'm here to do is I'm a structured designer. That's what I do. That's what I did in the military. Drop me in chaos or something not there, I'll build something. And so the first thing is like, okay, let's build this to scale. And then the greatest part is, as I thought it would be, is a lot of agents have reached out, what can I do to be a part of this? And I was like, okay, here's my people. You're used to being a part of the system. You are a part of the machine in the military. And I need to design a structure that I can bring as many of you into the structure as I possibly can. And it's not just me running the show, because that's just not how military works. And so we've formed a board of directors so far. We have 8 individuals there. And then now we're forming ambassadors, which in my head, I kind of go through the NCO core, right? Is my E5s and 6s, and then I'm putting some state ambassadors when we start getting some high density locations. Those are my E7s through E9s, and then I have some committees started and I'm like, well, shoot, these are my warrant officers. It's all very specific. And it's like, well, let's create a structure that has military infused like concepts into it. If we can create an industry or create an infrastructure that feels like military, it's going to give them hopefully structure, but it's also some familiarity, right? I understand this structure. It's not foreign to me. And so that's what we're trying to work through is how do we use the terms, use the structure so that people can then fit into it and become a part of the structure and then continue to grow it out a little bit more.
And I think that sometimes that's the missing piece because the structure, the foundation, what they're used to bringing, there's so many transferable skills, and it's again kind of going back to what we were talking about, giving them the ability to express and communicate what they were. And I know, I joke, I think most military would go in and make excellent property managers. That they
Absolutely.
come in maintaining a M16, maintaining an Apache helicopter, maintaining a Humvee, whatever, the PMCS, the process, the checklist, property manager is the same stinking thing. It's a completely you get shot at less, it doesn't explode most of the
Yes.
time, right? I mean, but it's
Oh,
the
part-
same
yeah.
it's the same process, and that's where when I transitioned was right into property management, and I was like, "Oh, this is, same it's a bicycle, it's just a different bicycle. It's the same thing. I just have to learn a couple new systems, how this works, but yet, no, if anybody would have told me, "Oh, yeah, you'd been a natural fit over here," well, no, I would have never put 2 and 2 together because it's a building, it's not a helicopter. So I think putting some framework and ability to communicate around it is great, because I think it's gonna help aid in that transition as they come through, and especially those kinda 2 to 4 years of moving through the military, getting out, and then trying to become a civilian, understand it, having something that's familiar is gonna be huge.
Well, if you understand it, you have words to describe it, and then you find those who are around you that they're your battle buddies again. And that's what I wanted to help reinstall is the civilian world's lonely and it's very siloed, and then the military, you were never alone. Between basic training where you were given a battle buddy from day one and that's how you progress through it. And that's where it's like we can do this. It's going to take some thought, are we going to get it perfect? No, it's going to take us some time to build. Uh, but if we can make it feel like it's the same structure, what will that do? Not only just to confidence, but for the demons that come with it. Unfortunately, we all have our own stuff coming from the service, and sometimes these are the only people that may understand what you're going through. And so when you're having a bad day and stuff, most of the time you don't feel comfortable telling everybody, obviously, especially in the civilian world. That's one thing I struggled. The stuff I've seen, no one should ever have to see it, let alone should they have more likely not seen it. And now we can actually have a veteran call and say, well, let's talk about PTSD. Let's talk about how strongly verbiage we have with our clients sometimes where they can get a little, ooh, you know, if they're not military and just, understanding our communication style and how we can get into like, we're going in this mode. And that's not always how civilians work. So, yeah, it's just a translation layer. We have to help them translate better. It's just that assimilation.
Yeah. Well, and I think the community is the important part, and I think one of the things, at least in my journey, what helped me was that as I was getting ready to graduate my undergrad, we had a Marine Corps Mustang. He got out as a captain. I think he got out as a captain, but a prior enlisted guy. He and I just like an Army guy and a Marine do. We got along, but we talk crap. And he was a semester ahead of me. So he started a little bit sooner than I did, even though I was kind of full time, my last senior year. And we both looked at it, we are competing. And it was the same way that we competed inside the platoon. I want to beat you in PT. I'm going to get a better rifle score. I'm going to do all this. We fought over who was gonna become a CCIM first. I won. Who was gonna be a broker first? Well, he won. Like, we both focused on what we could do, and we got together on a regular basis, and, "What are you doing?" "Man, I'm doing this." "Man, you're killing it. I need to do that." "Oh, yeah, this is what I'm doing." Like, there was an open playbook because I wanted him to be as best as he could, so every time I beat him, I felt better, but there was such a military mindset of having somebody, a battle buddy, to go out there, compete against, but also wanna see them win as well, and I think that's the sometimes such a difference in military mindset from civilian is that when I worked in corporate, people were just trying to snipe you to get you out of the way so they could move up, not I want to beat the best, which is so much more of a military
Oh,
mindset.
absolutely. Well, it's the group mentality. It's if we all finish and we're all together, and that's what I always tell everybody. And they're like, "Well, why are we building? What are we doing?" It's like, look at we can go out and individually build something. We're going to build stuff, but imagine what we can do together and what we can build together? Because as you said, we have been trained and taught to execute. We can be pure execution agents, and so we challenge each other. I mean, when you're in execution mode and you're just failing forward, and that was another thing too, we were allowed to fail forward. Nothing's perfect. You don't get a chance to have anxiety or overthink in the military. It's just go, stop thinking, go, stop thinking, go. And that's what I love about the military group is if you give them an idea and you give them a place to fail forward and learn with each other, they'll come together and they will accomplish it together. You don't see them spread out individualistically. Most often, you see them pack. And it's like, okay, let's do this together. Who has the skill set? And they start rearranging who's doing what and actually, compartmentalizing people into skill sets. And it's like, well, there's military. That's what we were built for.
So, obviously still new in the role for KW military, a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, what are you hoping to see that division becomes?
My overarching goal is, we have two missions, and I always tell everybody that. First and foremost, there are millions of clients out there, families, and service members that need our help. So we want to make sure that we're providing mission ready agents. So that's you'll hear me say pathways and mission readiness. That's all the military was ever for is mission readiness. You never left training. You never got put into a mission where you didn't have the right equipment, the right skill set, knowledge, and go. That's one thing I think the military does well, and so that's the goal for our group is every agent that enters into our system needs mission readiness. And that's going through specific certifications and trainings. If you don't have a buyer guide, you will have one. If you don't have a listing guide, you will have one. I don't want you to leave my infrastructure not fully mission ready for your client and for yourself. And then as people have progressed into it, we have a national network called My Military HQ. It's my command center. And right now we have a little over 500 agents that have already started with it, but they populate on a map. What are their specialties? And then they group out that way. But my goal is if we can create a strong couple thousand person mission ready unit for both the consumers out there. Imagine, I mean, especially with this administration, politics aside, it's a very strong military administration. We see a significant amount of people going into the military again. So we're going to have more and more clients populating, more and more VA benefits coming. And with the VA benefits, they're even getting better. They're trying to make it more competitive. So with the economy the way it is, the VA benefit itself doesn't have a down payment. We're talking affordability. This is probably the best time right now for military to give a heads, to get up and going and get a home if they don't already have one. So we're wanting to create and really, I want to mobilize thousands of agents to come together, become mission ready, and then offer a place where clients can come to them and know that they're taken care of. They have a military agent on their side. And then obviously creating that community for those agents, that we're working together to have a new purpose. Our purpose is a duty to protect our clients out there and our duty to protect each other. So that's what I'm hoping for. So the next, couple of years, can we do 2, 3, 4,000 agents mission ready that we in Keller Williams military become the place. Oh, you need a military agent? Oh, KW. They have an entire group. That's what I want to see. And if could you imagine every affordable home out there in the next couple of years that we're putting in offers for a VA client? I mean, that's what I want to see is can we get our veterans more homes, more affordable homes that work for them? Right now it's like 20%. Currently, I think of most, closings. Why can't it be 30 or 40%? So that's the goal.
Yeah, that you got your work cut out for you. It's a long one to get there, but I love the vision. I love the direction that you're going. If somebody is with KW, how do they join KW military? And then if they are not with KW, how would they end up joining KW
Totally.
military?
So the biggest rain right now, so we're in tech transition. So we're moving all of our infrastructure. So the place to go is mymilitaryhq.com. So that is our main infrastructure now. And as soon as you go there, it kind of gives a full examples of what we do, our missions, who we are, what our pillars are. And in the login, you're going to see both the login and sign up for KW. And most importantly, for those who are outside of KW, it's join the mission. If this mission calls to you and that's something that you need in that structure and to have the community again, reach out to us. And I'm also available military at kw.com. Talk to me. Come in and see what we're doing and see if this is something that can provide you that transition, that structure that you needed. And that's the goal right now, and what we're doing for both inside and out right now.
Awesome. So, last question to kind of wrap everything up. You've obviously had a very interesting career, both in the military, going out of the military, now into the real estate realm. Eh, Knowing what you know now in your transition, is there anything that you would have done differently, or maybe a lesson that you wish you didn't learn as hard or as difficult as you learned it?
And that's it's just sitting back and, you know, my fail forward was I kind of got lost in trying to figure out what my skill sets were. And thankfully, the only reason that I was on a good path was because I have an immense need for knowledge and curiosity. So I went into education and got educated. So that occupied my mind space. But really taking a step back and who are you? What are you interested in? Really trying to figure out the why behind, what gives you purpose in life, and not just military, but what about the military gave you purpose? And then trying to find that career path that aligns with it earlier. I kind of dabbled until I found it a little bit. And so I probably wasted some time. I was going through my discovery, but it's really just being true to yourself and not what you think everybody wants you to do and following what everybody says you should do and really taking a deep look inside.
Good stuff. Shannon, thank you so much for your time on this, sharing what your vision is for, just KW military, but also your journey and all this as well. Little different. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of female veterans come through as well. So having a little bit of a different perspective on this one as well, I think was really appreciated. And it sounds like if somebody, wants to reach out, they have questions, obviously you can put those in the chat or put those in there. But if they wanted to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for them to do so?
Right now, military at kw.com email. So I have that manned 24 hours a day. So that's my direct contact. And that's kind of what I'm going through right now, just for scalability right now. And then I reach out and I have some office hours and things like that. So that would be my direct line right there. And then we'll find a way to connect on phone, Zoom, and see what we can do.
Awesome. Well, Shanice, again, thank you so much for your time and looking forward to what you guys do with KW Military.
I appreciate it.